John Wayne walked off set after a director's insult. No shouting, no threats, just silence, boots on gravel, and a decision that froze an entire production. What happened next would change the tone of the film, and the people on that set, forever. Hollywood, 1966. The desert outside Kanab, Utah, baked under a hard white sun, the kind that bleaches color out of everything it touches. The set looked right from a distance, wooden facades, hitching posts, dust kicked up by horses, but something felt off. Crew members moved without urgency. Conversations were clipped. This wasn't a John Ford set, and everyone knew it. This was a film run by a young director with fresh awards from film school, sharp opinions, and a chip on his shoulder the size of Monument Valley. The studio had brought John Wayne in late, not as a favor, but as a solution. The picture was behind schedule. The dailies were flat. Investors were nervous. Wayne was 59 now, older, heavier, one lung gone, but when he stepped onto a Western set, things usually settled into place. Authority had a way of following him. That morning, Wayne arrived early, wearing his usual work clothes, not costume yet, just slacks, boots, and his hat pulled low. He greeted grips by name, nodded to wranglers, exchanged a quiet word with the cinematographer about light angles. He didn't hover. He didn't announce himself. He simply belonged there. The director noticed all of it and resented every second. Rehearsal was called just before noon. The scene was simple on paper. Wayne's character confronts a younger man accused of stealing cattle. No gunplay, just dialogue. A moral moment. The director wanted it fast, clipped, modern. Wayne read the page once, then again, then looked up, eyes narrowing slightly, not in anger but in thought. He didn't stop the rehearsal. He waited. When his turn came, he delivered the lines as written. They sounded raw, thin, like they belonged to another movie. Wayne finished, removed his hat, and said quietly, almost politely, "That line doesn't fit the man. Out here, he wouldn't say it that way." The director snapped his head around. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. In front of 40 crew members, he laughed. Not a warm laugh, but a sharp one. "With all due respect, Duke," he said, voice carrying, "this isn't one of your old Ford pictures. It's 1966. We don't need the John Wayne routine. Just say the words. You don't act. You just show up and play yourself." Silence dropped across the set like a curtain. No one moved. A boom operator froze mid-adjustment. An assistant director stared at the ground. This wasn't a disagreement about craft anymore. It was an insult, delivered publicly, deliberately. Wayne didn't respond right away. He didn't glare. He didn't smile. He simply looked at the director for a long moment, measuring him, the way men used to do before deciding whether something was worth fighting over. Then he reached up, removed his hat, and set it carefully on a nearby chair. The smallness of the gesture made it heavier than shouting ever could. "All right," Wayne said, voice calm, almost gentle. He turned and walked away from his mark. The director smirked. "We're rolling, Mr. Wayne," he called after him. Wayne didn't turn around. He kept walking, past the camera, past the lights, past the crew who parted without realizing they were doing it. His boots crunched against gravel, steady, unhurried. Someone whispered, "Is he?" but didn't finish the sentence. Wayne didn't go to his trailer. He didn't slam a door. He didn't demand a meeting. He walked straight to the edge of the set, where the desert opened up wide and empty, and kept going until the noise faded. Behind him, the assistant director hesitated, unsure whether to call cut. The director waved him off. "Give him a minute," he said loudly, trying to sound in control. "He needs to cool down." But the minute stretched. And then another. Finally, someone realized Wayne wasn't coming back. The director cursed under his breath and ordered the crew to reset without him. They tried to shoot coverage. A stand-in stepped into frame. The scene collapsed immediately. The dialogue felt hollow. The weight was gone. Even the director could see it, though. He pretended otherwise. "We'll fix it in editing," he snapped. But editing couldn't fix what had just happened. By late afternoon, the sun dipped low and the desert cooled, but the tension didn't. Word spread quietly through the set. Wayne had left the location. Not to his hotel. Not to dinner. He was gone. The studio representative arrived just before wrap, face tight, eyes sharp. "Where's Wayne?" he asked. No one answered. The director finally spoke, defensive now. He walked off, over a line. The representative didn't argue. He didn't scold. He simply nodded, already calculating the cost. Wayne's absence wasn't theatrical. It was total. And for the first time that day, the director felt something unfamiliar creep in beneath his confidence. Not anger, not embarrassment, doubt. Because John Wayne didn't walk off sets lightly. He had survived studios, wars, illnesses, and decades of Hollywood egos. If he had decided to leave, it wasn't a tantrum. It was a line drawn in the sand. And as the crew packed up in uneasy silence, one thought moved through them all, unspoken but heavy. If the Duke didn't come back, this picture was already dead. John Wayne didn't leave to make a point. He left because some lines, once crossed, don't deserve a second debate. And by the next morning, the entire production learned exactly how much weight his absence carried. Dawn came early over the Utah desert, pale light spilling across the empty set, but the usual energy was gone. Trucks idled. Crew members gathered in small knots, speaking in low voices. Everyone kept glancing toward the road, half expecting to see Wayne's familiar figure walking back in. Hat low, expression unreadable. He didn't. Call time came and went. The director arrived late, sunglasses on, jaw tight, projecting confidence that fooled no one. "Let's move," he said, clapping his hands once. "We're behind." The assistant director hesitated, then called the scene. Without Wayne, the blocking felt wrong. The younger actor tried to fill the space, raising his voice, overplaying every line. It only made the emptiness more obvious. The camera rolled, but no one believed what they were seeing. At Video Village, the cinematographer frowned. The frame looked wide, too wide, like the center had been hollowed out. By mid-morning, the studio representative was back, this time not alone. Two men in suits stood with him, faces set, eyes sharp. They watched a playback in silence. When it ended, one of them cleared his throat. "Where's Wayne?" he asked again. The director launched into an explanation. Artistic differences, generational shift, ego, but the words sounded thin, even to him. The men exchanged a look. "He's not under contract to be insulted," one of them said quietly. "He's under contract to carry this picture." The director bristled. "He doesn't carry it," he snapped. "The story does." The suit nodded slowly. "Then the story should be able to stand without him." They left without another word. Lunch came. Wayne's chair sat empty, his name still taped to the back. No one removed it. At the mess tables, conversation stalled. Someone finally said what everyone was thinking. "He was right about that lie." Another nodded. Ford always listened to him. A third added, "You don't get to be wrong that many times and still be standing." The director overheard none of it, or pretended not to. He ate alone in his trailer, staring at the sides, replaying the moment in his head, the laugh, the words, the way Wayne had looked at him. He told himself it didn't matter. That Wayne needed this film more than the film needed him. That Hollywood was changing, and men like Wayne hadn't caught up yet. But when shooting resumed, the desert itself seemed to argue back. Takes stretched longer. Tempers shortened. Even the horses refused marks, restless and distracted. By late afternoon, the assistant director approached the director carefully. "The studio's asking if we've reached out," he said. The director snapped, "I'm not begging." The assistant director nodded and backed away, but the damage was done. That evening, word came down quietly. The dailies were being reviewed in Los Angeles, again. Not a good sign. Miles away, in a modest hotel room, Wayne sat alone at a small table, script folded neatly in front of him, untouched. He wasn't angry. Anger burned hot and fast, and this wasn't that. This was resolve. He had called the studio earlier, spoken to the representative calmly. "I'll come back when the picture remembers what it's trying to be," he'd said. Nothing more. No threats. No conditions beyond that. The studio understood exactly what he meant. Back on set, the director finally cracked. Near sunset, he stood watching a failed take, dust hanging in the air, and realized something he hadn't expected. Without Wayne, no one was listening to him either. Authority doesn't come from a title. It comes from trust, and his had evaporated. The next morning, a message arrived from the studio. Short, direct. "Get Wayne back, or we shut down." The director read it twice, then once more, hoping the words would change. They didn't. He sat for a long time after, alone in his trailer, staring at his reflection in the mirror. The insult replayed in his mind, the laugh, the certainty with which he'd delivered it. He finally understood what he'd mistaken for strength. It wasn't bravery. It was inexperience. That afternoon, a car pulled up at the edge of the set. Not Wayne's. A studio car. The representative stepped out and addressed the crew. "We're pausing production," he said. Temporarily. No one cheered. No one groaned. They all knew what temporary meant. As the sun dropped behind the hills, casting long shadows across the empty street set, the director stood alone in the middle of it, the weight of his own words finally settling in. He had challenged a man whose silence spoke louder than any argument. And now, whether Wayne returned or not, the lesson had already been delivered. John Wayne didn't return to prove a point. He returned because the work still mattered, and because some lessons are best taught without saying a word. The call came just after sunrise. The director answered it with a tight throat and a rehearsed apology ready on his tongue, but it never came to that. The studio representative spoke first. "Wayne's coming back today," he said. "No conditions. No statements. He wants one clean run at the scene." The director swallowed. Just one. That's all he asked for. When the line went dead, the director sat there for a long moment, unsure whether to feel relieved or exposed. On set, the news traveled fast. The mood shifted instantly. Crew members stood a little straighter. Conversations picked up. By mid-morning, a familiar figure appeared at the far end of the street set, walking in from the desert, hat on, script under his arm. Wayne didn't make an entrance. He never did. He nodded to the grips, shook a wrangler's hand, exchanged a quiet word with the cinematographer about the light. He didn't look at the director at first. When he finally did, it wasn't hostile. It was neutral, professional. "Morning," Wayne said. "Morning," the director replied, voice thinner than he wanted. No apology was offered. None was asked for. The assistant director called everyone in. Wayne took his mark. The scene was the same one that had caused everything. Same lines. Same blocking. Same desert sun hanging low, casting long shadows. "Cameras ready," the assistant director said. "Rolling." Wayne waited a beat longer than the script indicated. Not long enough to draw attention. Just long enough to let the silence settle. Then he spoke the line. Unchanged. But the words carried something new. Age. Experience. The weight of a man who had seen consequences. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't lean into the younger actor. He simply stood there, still, letting the other man feel small without being told he was. The younger actor faltered, just for a moment, thrown off by the gravity in Wayne's delivery. He recovered, rushed his response. Wayne listened, eyes steady, then replied with a pause so precise it felt intentional, as if the desert itself had taken a breath. When the scene ended, no one spoke. The camera kept rolling. Dust drifted through the frame. Finally, the assistant director whispered, "Cut." No one clapped. No one needed to. The director stared at the monitor, the color draining from his face as he realized what had just happened. Wayne hadn't changed the lines. He hadn't challenged the script. He had simply inhabited it, and in doing so, exposed the difference between reciting words and understanding them. The director stepped forward, unsure of what to say, but Wayne had already removed his hat and was heading back to his mark. "If you want another," Wayne said calmly, "we can do another." The director shook his head. "No," he said. That was it. From that moment on, the set felt different. The director stopped giving speeches and started giving notes. Short ones, practical ones. And when Wayne offered a quiet suggestion, it was taken seriously. Not out of fear, but respect. The picture finished on schedule. The studio was satisfied. The director never mocked Wayne again. Not on that set. Not on any other. Years later, in an interview meant to celebrate his early career, the director was asked about the film. He paused, then smiled faintly. "I learned more in one afternoon with John Wayne than I did in 4 years of film school," he said. He didn't argue. He didn't lecture. He just showed me what professionalism looks like. Wayne never spoke publicly about the incident. He didn't need to. His work said enough. And that's how the crew remembered it. Not as a clash of egos, but as a moment when silence, dignity, and craft reminded everyone what really carries weight in this business. Sometimes the strongest comeback isn't loud. Sometimes it's just standing still, saying the line, and letting the truth do the rest.